Hey, everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia, back with the latest episode of the Jungle War podcast, powered by CLNS and our great friends at Prize Picks and the Game Time app. Here with me on this episode of the Jungle War pod, wrapping up Bengals minicamp 2024, is the one and only Richard Skinner. Skinny does a great job covering the Bengals for Local 12 Sports. I think all of us know that by now, and everyone who has followed his great work over the years has some observations on the minicamp that just concluded, and certainly looking forward to hearing Skinny talk about his golf game, which I'm sure he's going to be getting onto now that summer vacation is finally here. Yes?
It's kind of close to here, Mike. I still have a couple of stories to write. I got a series I'm going to start over the next couple of weeks where I'm going to make a case for some Reds that should be in the Hall of Fame and make a case for some of the Bengals that should be in the Hall of Fame. It's a good in-between break where we're all looking for something to fill the void, I guess. And it's also time to get on with the golf game a little bit too, for sure.
It is definitely time for me to do that, and I'm looking forward to it. I have some stories to work on as well. As a matter of fact, I interrupted that work to have you on for this podcast and wrap up minicamp. Let's get to, I think, obviously, it's always going to be the biggest story, Joe Burrow and how his wrists look, how he looked. I think it's safe to say, Skinny, he is still taking it pretty easy. And the thing I asked Joe Burrow this week was whether or not he regards his football practice right now and the way he's throwing the ball as part of his rehab. And do you feel that that's pretty much the way he's treating it?
I do. And I guess I didn't expect to see him rip it, for lack of a better term. And I can't remember who asked the question the other day who said, if you had to rip one into a tight window right now,
Charlie. Yep.
Could you do it? And he said 100%. I guess I'll take him at his word. And I don't, we never really saw him rip it, right? We saw him make some throws. We made him, it wasn't obviously a very strenuous practice. And I think we all want to micro-analyze, even I think fans micro-analyze. They see the video and it's not coming out of his hand right. Listen, I'm not Tom House. I'm not I'm not Jordan Palmer. I'm not skilled enough in the mechanics of that to know whether or not he's completely affected by it. But I think it is safe to say that he wasn't out there trying to get ready for the season opener. And he made that point to us, right? Where he said, I'm trying to get ready for September, not for June. And that also may be him kind of, the flip side would be, well, maybe it's not feeling right. And that's why he is taking it easy. And he's hoping another month, another month to 5 weeks before camp starts, the healing process will occur even more. And maybe that's the case. I honestly don't know. But yeah, to your point, I mean, we didn't see him do anything that made us go, wow. But I also think, he didn't do anything to make us go, ugh, either, in my opinion.
Right. I think that's a great way to look at it, Skinny. I think he expected to feel sore. I think the physicians, the surgeon, and everyone who's been associated with getting that wrist right had cautioned him, hey, don't expect big things in May and June because it's not going to be fully healed. All the scar tissue still has to be broken up and all that. That's why when we see him on the practice field looking at his hand and squeezing it, it's essentially, from what I've been told, someone who's been through a wrist surgery, he's trying to break up the scar tissue, and it's just part of rehab.
Yeah, and I think people see that and get alarmed that, oh, it's hurting. Well, it also may be hurting as well, but to your point, that is the other part of it, is he's probably been told, hey, keep doing that after you throw some, or maybe even if you feel a little bit of pain, that's just you breaking up the scar tissue. So, yeah, to your point, I don't think any of this is alarming. I've answered this on several interviews. We're not going to know how fully ready he is until there's an 11-on-11 in training camp. He drops back with some bullets around him. Obviously, he can't get hit. That's normal in training camp practices for quarterbacks. But he has to rip a throw into that tight window that we talked about, or the read is to throw a deep ball, and we see either really good or, like I said, I'm also of the ilk that I'm not so sure we're going to know all about this until he takes his first hit and has to brace a landing with that wrist as well, right? I mean, it's just part of football. You get sacked or hit a lot of times because they throw the ball so much. He's going to get hit. He's going to have to figure out a way to brace the fall. And does that compromise it? So, I don't think the mini camp or the OTAs prior to it really, definitively gave us an answer either way for Joe Burrow. And I don't think we're going to get that until, again, sometime in training camp when he has to make that tight window throw.
I also think, and Zach Taylor spoke to us on Thursday as minicamp wrapped up. the thing I took away from Zach Taylor regarding Joe Burrow, he's going to have to trust what Joe Burrow tells him.
Right.
And he is not going to get into the business of, analyzing every single throw and saying, well, he looked good there. He didn't look good there. I looked, just average here. He's not going to get into that business. And I think that's very smart of Zach Taylor. And he's putting the responsibility on Joe. You have to be honest with us. You have to let us know where you're at so that we can make adjustments in our preparation for the upcoming season.
Yeah, and I also think, though, that relationship has gone to where Zach has taken a little bit more of a role of telling Joe, hey, here's the plan, and we're going to stick to this plan. And we've seen it. He, the one day 2 weeks ago where he took the day off when we were there as media members and he didn't throw it, sent up alarm bells because for all we knew, he'd been throwing every day up until that point. Lo and behold, we're told he's been given a day off. And in this minicamp, he did go back-to-back days. It wasn't strenuous, but they did give him the Thursday off. So I think that's Zach kind of putting his foot down in a way and saying, and I think he even said this to us, that listen, I have to manage him a little bit more. Even when he says he's feeling great, that's fine, but we're going to take a step back and not push this. And we've heard Joe start to say those things of need to listen to my body more. That's what I'm doing. And, he even lamented last year with the calf, right? Of, right. I pushed it and I should have listened to my body and he didn't. And it cost the team a slow start because of that. And maybe this is, just him being more mature and Zach Taylor to some degree saying, hey man, I know I've been listening to you in this regard, but here's what we're going to do for your benefit.
All right, let's move on to the next biggest player that everybody had their eyes on for this week for Bengals minicamp, and that was Ja'Marr Chase. And the news is he was at minicamp, and I think all along, Skinny, we anticipated Ja'Marr Chase would show up. He wasn't going to hold out and get fined. That wasn't going to happen. However, he really didn't take part in any practices. Yes, he was on the field. Clearly, he went through some of the motions. He actually was there, and Zach Taylor pointed this out on Thursday, really as a cheerleader, as a team leader, certainly in the wide receiver room. He is the guy that everyone else in that room, with T. Higgins obviously not being there because he hasn't signed his franchise tag tender. He is the guy everybody else looks up to. And I thought, Ja'Marr Chase, he didn't talk to us in the media. I think that was by design. I don't think he wants to say the wrong thing at this particular point in time. But your thoughts on Ja'Marr Chase showing up and not talking to the media?
Yeah, I'm with you on the fact that I never thought he would not show up. It is mandatory. You can be fined. The fine is certainly something that Ja'Marr Chase can pocket with whatever contract he's going to sign in the near future. I don't think it would hurt his pocketbook, but I also think it was the right. I think he knew that's the right thing to do. It's mandatory. You want to be around your teammates. He's a good teammate, and part of it is they're doing some more probably strenuous install stuff or maybe more advanced install stuff. So it's good to be around to see some of that. And listen, I know people make the deal of, hey, Joe and the wide receivers got to get their timing together. If Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase and Joe Burrow and T. Higgins don't have their timing together at this point, they're never getting it together. They've had thousands of reps together. That part has been so overinflated, in my opinion, that, again, Ja'Marr did the right thing for me. If he doesn't want to come to the voluntary stuff because of the potential contract extension down the road, fine. I got no qualms with that. Right. I wouldn't have had qualms if he didn't come to the mini camp either, but I also understand that it was the right thing to do, and he knew it was the right thing to do, and he did it. So I think that checked off a nice box for everybody.
Did you notice? And I really didn't until after the fact when I re-listened to the tape of Zach Taylor on Thursday. I thought there was a thinly veiled shot at Aaron Rodgers. Did you notice that?
Well, he did say other teams, I think, because there's been a couple of other players for other teams that have not come. Yes. I think New Orleans has a guy that didn't come to their mini camp. Maybe a Falcons player didn't come. And Aaron Rodgers, certainly the biggest thing.
I think, but an average football fan that hears that, there's only one guy you think of this offseason who hasn't reported to mandatory minicamp, and their head coach, or his head coach, Robert Salah, stuck his neck out and is essentially staking his career to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, no question.
And with Zach Taylor on Thursday saying, we really appreciate Ja'Marr Chase being here, taking on a leadership role, really being a guy other guys can look up to. it's a different dynamic, Skinny. Really different.
Yeah, no question about it. And and that was the other thing for Trent Brown as well to show up. He's probably got some ways to go to get himself in a little bit better shape. He's a massive human being. But
Very
listen,
massive.
Again, he's a veteran. He's been in the league 9 seasons, 10 seasons. Would I have liked him to been there at the voluntary stuff to be around the guys? I know he supposedly had some family emergency situations, and take him at his word for that. But he was there for the mandatory part. So the guys that had to be there were there. And just to be clear, for people wondering about, why we're not talking about T. Higgins in that vein, T is not under contract. He does have the franchise tag. He's not subject to fine because technically he is not under contract at the moment. So we never, I don't think any of us believed he was going to show, and he didn't. In fact, I don't believe he's going to show until sometime in August when he finally capitulates and signs the franchise tag.
Do you think it's going to be pretty much the same as Jesse Bates?
I do.
Yeah. I mean, I do. Sign that tag midway through preseason.
Yeah, I do. The last preseason game is August 22nd. I could foresee him right before that last preseason game, that week of August, signing, getting through a couple of practices that week. It's a very short week because they play on a Saturday, then a Thursday, and then having the full 2-week ramp up before the regular season starts to get himself ready. And I think that's plenty of time.
He is Richard Skinner of Local 12 Cincinnati. Does a great job covering the Cincinnati Bengals for local12.com. I want to move on to the defense now. And I actually thought, for what it's worth, and yet Joe Burrow wasn't at full strength, wasn't going full effort on, it's probably the wrong way of putting it. I don't think the urgency of the practice was anything like you would see.
Agreed.
Certainly in training camp. But I thought it was significant that the defense did show pretty well on Wednesday when they had a couple of pass breakups. And the first team against Joe Burrow, you were looking at guys like certainly Jermaine Pratt, but DJ Turner and Dax Hill. Both of them had pass breakups, and I find that significant because those are two guys that are going to be battling for the left corner spot in training camp.
Yeah, and I'm probably surmising here because they hate when we label guys first teamers, right? It's something that gets frowned upon. Coaches don't read anything into it. So I've taken to writing it this way: the first defensive unit that came on the field to take on the first offensive unit that came on the field. And I thought it was significant that Dax Hill was the outside corner with that first unit. It gives me a thought that he's somehow got a leg up on DJ Turner. It's by no means, to your point, finalized. I do think it will be an absolute training camp battle that decides it. But I do think it may now be Dax's job to lose by them inserting him with that first unit.
I'm not willing to go that far.
Okay.
I think it was, okay, we're going to give Dax Hill some reps out of the chute and give him that chance to beat out DJ Turner. But I don't think we're not in the team meetings, right? And we don't see how Dax Hill responds to situations when coaches present these players with them, as opposed to the way DJ Turner handles the same situations in the classroom.
And there's no official depth chart at the moment, so we don't know that either.
Right. And there shouldn't be. And
no, right.
Look, these are all kind of BS talking points in June. That's what we do. But that's what minicamp is there for. It's really there for the players to get around each other. And as Burrow said, and I thought this was spot on, it's for that camaraderie and the ability to learn how everybody communicates with each other. That's the big deal of having these guys in classrooms in June.
And that's why, I mean, these are important, and they certainly do accomplish things in these, but they're not getting ready to play the New England Patriots on June the 11th and 12th and 13th. It is, to your point, it's, again, to get some reps in, to get some install in, for rookies to understand this is how kind of practice goes. And to Zach's point, he even mentioned some of these rookies, when they come back, they're going to find out that it's no longer 75, 77 degrees. It's 90 degrees, and the practices are harder. The intensity is higher, and all of those things, and they have to prepare for it. But yeah, it's still a necessary point of the offseason, in my opinion.
Back to Joe Burrow. Seeing as though we're spending like 90% of this podcast talking about number 9. I thought it was interesting, the eye candy comment that came from Joe Burrow on Tuesday, and his anticipation this year, Skinny, that they are going to face different and multiple looks from defenses. They'll probably face a variety of defensive looks. And his answer to that is, well, we're going to have more varied offensive weaponry behind us. And I think that I'm fascinated to see how that really evolves in training camp and into the preseason and into the regular season. And I said this on 700 WLW with Rocky Boyman and Jason Williams on Thursday. I said they wanted to know, are the Bengals going to be more explosive on offense? And my answer was, I think they're going to be more versatile. They're going to have more options for Joe to choose from.
Yeah, two things. I mean, if you remember at the Combine, talking to Dan Pitcher, he said that was kind of his charge this offseason, was to find ways to create more explosive plays. But to your point, because you asked that question to Joe, I think we all come into this looking at who's going to be the slot receiver to replace Tyler Boyd, right? T will be back. He's going to play. Jamar's back. And I don't look at it like that. I look at it as, to your point, the varied ways they can do things with a combination of Yoshavash and Higgins and outside and Chase in the slot. With the combination of two tight ends on the field with just two wide receivers and Mike Gesicki being in the slot. Creating ways maybe for Jermaine Burton in the slot and outside the slot. Charlie Jones to be in the slot. And that's where I think you're going to see those multiple wide receiver groupings. You're going to have Jamar Chase on the field 98% of the time. You're going to probably have T. Higgins on the field 90% of the time. But then how do they group them? It's not always Jamar on the outside. I think they really are fascinated to find ways to get Jamar working out of the slot to create some mismatches. And I think that's part of the explosive play situation. I think there's going to be explosive plays in the running game that weren't there in large part because Joe Mixon had lost that explosiveness. And you have two running backs now that really have, a chance to make explosive plays. They ran into a lot of 6-man boxes last year, Mike, and they didn't really have a lot of big plays out of that. And it should constitute not just, effective runs or efficient runs. That should constitute an occasional big play or two in the course of a game. So I think you'll get some explosive plays out of that as well.
I am fascinated to see how the Bengals offense looks and how much different it is. I think it's going to evolve this year, and I think they have more options both on the outside and the inside to attack defenses with.
Well, and I think to Joe, and Joe said this to us back in, he came back in early May. He saw. Actually, maybe it was his exit interview after the surgery. I can't remember which, but he saw how effective some of that play action pass stuff was with Jake Browning. So you can incorporate more of that. I think it will be incorporated more, especially if you're running the ball effectively and consistently. You'll see some more of that. Obviously, you're going to see Joe Burrow in the gun with an empty backfield at times because it's what he likes to do. It's what he's best at. If you can block it up, and that's your hope, is you've improved now the right side of the tackle situation, or at least at the very least you haven't taken a step backwards, and you can have 5-man protections from time to time. So I do think you're going to see a whole bunch of different things from this offense for sure.
No-brainer of no-brainers extending Ted Karras, albeit just for 1 year through 2025. Yeah. But what did you think?
I'll be honest with you, it surprised me a little bit, only because they're not big on offering guys into their 30s, right? That's been part of the mantra.
31, that's correct, yeah, and it would be 33 by the end of the deal.
Yeah, but I do think no-brainer in terms of it does make a ton of sense. Ted didn't have a great year last year, but still had a capable year. And that's probably all you need from a center. Would you like to have a Pro Bowl guy? Sure, but I just need a capable guy. And obviously his leadership is a big part of it. And it gives you the bridge to really find somebody. Right now you've got 2 late-round picks battling to back up for him, the kid they drafted out of Miami this year, and Trey Hill, who's on the final year of his rookie contract. And Trey's never really taken that. In fact, Trey really lost the backup center job to Max Sharping last year. By literally, they just were looking for somebody and turned to and Max didn't have to take snaps at it, but he was really technically the backup center because Trey was never activated for a single game. So, you're hoping one of those guys steps forward to go, okay, that's our future center, but it does buy you another bridge year too. If the kid from Miami just doesn't look like he can be effective at all, and Trey's obviously playing out his rookie deal, you're going to either have to go back on the open market 2 years from now, or draft maybe somebody next year at a spot where, a little bit higher in the draft to maybe be that replacement. So again, that part does make a ton of sense.
What do you think is the strength of Ted's game?
I think it's more the intangibles, in my opinion. He really is all about football. And I think that rubs off on the rest of the guys. I'm always fascinated. Alex Kappa locker's right next to him, right? And we crowd around Ted because he's just such a great soundbite. And you could just see the respect those guys, like Alex never gets offended by us crowding around him. In fact, I usually tell him when we're done, sorry about that, man. Thanks for being a good sport. He always smiles. He goes, no problem. And so I think you see that respect for a guy like Ted, because he is all about ball. He does probably get you in the right protections a lot of times because, of course, the center is the guy who calls out a lot of the protection changes. And you got to have a guy who's smart at that. Again, I don't think he's a great pass blocker. I'm not so sure he's a road grader in the run game, but I do think there's all those intangibles that do add up for him to be an effective starting center on a playoff caliber, Super Bowl caliber team.
I think the trust is there. I mean, that's what you need. If you're Joe Burrow, you want a center who knows what he's doing when he calls out protections. To me, and obviously, the Bengals have had their issues, obviously, very well documented in protecting Joe Burrow. But I think over the course since Ted Karras arrived, 2022, to now, safe to say, Skinny, it's improved dramatically.
Dramatically. And the funny part is, there's a lot made of Joe Burrow being sacked, right? And I think some of it's honestly overblown. The Bengals pass a lot. Guess what? If you drop back 45 times a game, you're going to get sacked a couple times. There's pretty good guys on the other side rushing the play. They're going to get through. Some of it is on Joe, and Joe admits that. It's 3rd and 13. What's the difference in 3rd and 21 if I take a sack or waiting an extra half a second for somebody to come open on a 3rd and 13 play and me being able to make that throw? So some of those sacks are on him too. So I do think, though, to your point, I mean, there's no question the horrifying of horrifying moments is still reliving the Tennessee playoff game in your head of watching how much he lead. And that was a game where he did get beat up, and they did that offensive line wasn't very effective that day. And that wasn't a great group. And guess what? None of them are around anymore. So that'll tell you that it has come light years.
I know we touched on this earlier, Skinny, as we wrap up here, but for training camp, biggest question probably going in, Joe Burrow, second biggest, T. Higgins. What do you think?
I think so. Although, again, I'm not alarmed if T's not going to be there, because I've already steeled my mind for him not being there because I saw it play out with Jesse Bates. And again, for those concerned about it's just less time to get time together, 2 weeks before the season, they'll be fine. They'll be just fine. And I know they play different positions. Jesse Bates came into camp late, and guess what? He went and balled out and then got paid by the Falcons. That's kind of part of this league. So yeah, I there is a small concern there if he opts not to sign, but it's $21.8 million guaranteed. You're not going to sign that. And if you don't sign that, well, then guess what? The rest of the league is going to look and go, dude, the last memory we have of you is being a hamstring injury prone wide receiver coming off a year, 2 years ago. And that's not going to get you paid.
Any rookies stand out to you during not only the mini camp, but before that, no TAs and off-season practice?
Yeah, as you know, it's always hard to tell. I mean, I know people want to make a snap judgment of Amarius Mims, but they don't do full 11-on-11s. They don't do blocking stuff against defensive guys, so you can't tell. But it was interesting. He was rotating with the ones a lot of times, he and Trent Brown, and some of that probably because Amarius was here and Trent wasn't. And also, eventually, Amarius is going to start some this year. He may start a bunch this year for all we know. And the early reports are he's taken to coaching. He looks athletic as all get out for a guy his size. But I'm just fascinated by Jermaine Burton. I think he's got a chance to be really, really good. It was interesting. I was a little surprised. And again, I don't expect guys off the top of their head to pop every name, but Joe Burrow was talking about, with Jamar and T not here, it's given him a chance to work with some of the other wide receivers. And he mentioned Andre Yoshivas by name. He mentioned Trent Irwin, who has gained his trust, right, by name. And he named Shedrick Jackson by name. That was interesting. That was interesting to me.
Shed.
Yeah, Shed is what he is. And didn't mention Jermaine or Charlie Jones. And again, I'm not expecting him to remember all those guys off the top of his head, but that was interesting that Shed was the third name that came off the top of his head.
I am not going to try and compare these. I don't want to make the comparison here between Amarius Mims and Jackson Carman, but you do remember a couple of years ago when so much was made of Jackson Carman starting with the ones in minicamp. And it's, you know what it is, Skinny? It is a good example, a good indication to fans out there why it's dangerous sometimes to read too much into these OTAs and minicamps. Because
the first training camp practice he came out, he was running with the third or fourth string, whatever the last string unit was, that's where he was.
Correct. And it's just, I think sometimes coaches want to see when you put them out in certain situations, even when there's no pads and whatnot, Are they running? Are they understanding what the play design is, what the concept is?
Right.
Because really, when you're an offensive lineman, the first thing you do have to know is what's the concept? What should my angle be? What are my angles? What are my how I anchor myself on the line, and leverage is the word I was looking for. How do I leverage myself against potential, pass rushers?
Yeah, and they've got plenty of film from these minicamp things to look at, and I guarantee you they're going to break him down and say, here's the things you need to maybe work on here in the next few weeks. Maybe in the playbook you're missing this note or that note, and see where he's at when he comes back. And as far as correcting that, real quick along those lines, I found one other thing interesting yesterday that Zach Taylor said. It was about Chase Brown, where talked about Chase's improvement as a pass catcher, and Zach said, it's really, I can't remember how he phrased it, but it was really interesting to see how one little comment, the guy took one little comment, took that coaching and came back and improved on what we asked. And I thought, again, that's about earning trust from everybody. And you start earning trust from people, that's when coaches play you.
Well, and when you return after some time away and the coach takes notice of that, it means you really have hit the books, as they say. And
exactly.
That is very impressive. That is way to win brownie points with the coaching staff. I like Josh Newton. I am fascinating, and I'm not saying he's going to compete for a starting corner spot right out of the chute, but I love the athleticism he brings.
Yeah, he popped a couple times. And it is interesting. The Bengals haven't gone the veteran route at the corner position like I thought they would to add to the depth. I don't know if that surprises you or not, but it surprises me at the moment.
I think they want pure speed on the corners. I think if anything, and with the Chiefs in the years past and the speed they've always put out there, and now with the Dolphins and the speed that they can bring to the table, and Jalen Waddle obviously getting extended, and the Dolphins project to be a playoff team. That to me is a way of the Bengals saying, we've got to be fast. We've got to be very fast on the outside.
Yeah, it's a young group, though. I mean, you got a third-year guy coming up in Cam Taylor-Britt. This will be Dax's first year playing outside corner. Obviously, DJ Turner in his second year, Newton a rookie. DJ Ivey will probably eventually be in the depth mix whenever he returns from knee surgery, and that'll be a while. It probably will be sometime into the season. But, boy, that's a really young room at the moment.
So here's my answer to that. I'd rather be too young on the outside rather than be too young on the inside, because what we learned last year in the middle of the defense with Dax Hill, and Dax Hill's, I do believe he's a terrific young football player, ball hawking, has a lot of individual skills that really help him as an NFL defensive back. But I'd rather be too young on the outside and have the speed there than be inexperienced over the middle.
Yeah, and that's where getting Von Bell back was essential. You also got a Geno Stone who's not familiar with the system, but obviously coming off of a great year. And I think the addition of Von back there is huge. I've made this point too. Last year I didn't think it was a big deal that they lost Jesse and Von. I really thought they had a plan to overcome it. And it was unfortunate that it was Dax Hill in his first year back there, joined by Nick Scott, who didn't perform very well, but Nick was also new to the system. So you really have two guys who really don't know the system ins and outs, even close to Von and Jesse. I really think they had the blueprint of Von's going to be back there with Dax, and Von's going to take care of Dax. And when Von left, it was like, oh no, now we're in trouble. And it showed throughout the whole season. And I think that was important to bring Von back just because of what he does in terms of knowledge of the defense.
All right. He is Skinny, Richard Skinner of Local 12 Sports here in Cincinnati. Once again, Skinny, remind people what you're working on for Local 12.
Yeah, I've got a piece that's probably going to be up this weekend on the new kickoff rule, which is going to be fascinating to watch when those joint practices and preseason games come about. Darren Simmons he told me literally he's been changing things, not from practice to practice, not from week to week. He said, I'm literally changing stuff from rep to rep. I'm seeing something that doesn't look like it's going to work, and I'm changing it up on the fly. Talked to Evan McPherson a little bit about having to make tackles, and I love what he said. He goes, not keen on it. He goes, but I can't exactly let him go to the end zone, can I? And so this new kickoff rule fascinates me.
We laugh about that. That concerns me. And I was talking, actually I was talking to Chris Evans about this because he obviously is a big part of their special teams. And I told him, you really want the kicker? They really want, meaning the league, they really want kickers making more tackles. And that could grossly impact the end of games if you lose kickers to injuries. I am not a fan of that. I'll go on record right now.
I'm with you. And there's some teams that floated the idea of using a position player to do the kicking. And I floated that to Darren, and he said, yeah, I've tried some guys out. I don't think that's probably the route we're going to go. His thing was kickers are so good, and Evan's one of the best that those guys can pin kickoffs at the 2-yard line or somewhere in that vicinity with regularity, whereas the other guy, you're just taking a real chance. Darren also talked about probably there's going to be more kicks along the ground that'll bounce in that landing zone, because if it lands before the landing zone, it's a dead ball and it comes out to the 40. So if it lands in the landing zone, I think his point was we want to get the ball to roll a few times to allow the coverage unit to get through and to maybe pin them back there. So again, I'm just fascinated how people do this. I told our friend Paul Daner the other day at practice, because he wrote a story about this, talking to Darren last week. I said, you know what's going to end up happening, in my opinion? We're all talking about all this new kickoffs and guys are going to be more returns. You know, the touchback comes out to the 30. It's only a 5-yard difference from where it is now. I think a lot of coaches are going to go, to hell with it. Just kick it through the end zone and we'll give it the ball at the 30. It's only a 5-yard difference.
Right. And if it were me and I had a kicker like Evan McPherson, who means so much, I think that would be my approach. I'm not going to overthink it. And I think, you know, a guy like Darren Simmons, the reason he's so great is he's coaching for that situation or 2 or 3 that comes up during the course of a season where they have got to have a play. They have to execute a play for a specific reason, either ahead in the game or behind in the game late. And that's when they need to execute that play. It's not because they're going to be doing the play over and over and over.
Yeah, no. Yeah. And to your point about the kickers, I think the stats are like 25% or 30% of kickoffs that are used under this rule, where they're used. Kickers are involved in the tackle. Now, I don't know if that means solo tackles. I don't know if that means, you know, late on an assist. I don't think you want Evan McPherson involved in 30% of the plays on kickoff trying to make the tackle. And I know Evan doesn't want to do that. In fact, there was one last year. I can't remember what game it was, maybe Jacksonville, where he was about to make a tackle, and I'm like, oh, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. There's no, the risk is not worth the reward in this situation. And so if you're going to say that once a week about your team's kicker, I don't think that's what the league wants out of this. And I don't know what the happy medium is. I just enjoy the change. I think it's going to be fascinating again to watch. I mean, we may watch 15 kickoffs return for touchdowns in the preseason, and that's when the coaches are going to go, yeah, to hell, just kick it through the end zone. We're good. We're not playing this. We're not playing with this any longer.
I hope you get some good golf time.
I do too. I'm hoping for that as well, Mikey. I hope you do as well.
Maybe I will be joining you on the links.
I would like that.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen over the next several weeks. But anyway, he is Richard Skinny on Local 12 Sports. Be sure to follow his material there. He has always done a great job covering the Bengals and the National Football League. Want to thank our great sponsors. That would be Prize Picks and the Game Time app. Also want to thank our great producers at CLNS Media for always getting us on the platform. Thank you very much. Until next week, I'm Mike Petralia, Trags. Keep that jungle roaring.